everybody. Welcome back to the Meebits podcast. This is episode 21. Unbelievable. 21 already. I'm so grateful for you tuning in for this episode. And I am very, very excited to be joined today by Tyler Guyot. That you didn't know was that fancy of a last name pronunciation there. He is the co-founder of Good Vibes Club, pretty much the best performing NFT project in 2025. To become a dear friend, good friend of the Meebits, a Meebit holder himself, and just one of the coolest dudes that I've met in Web3 over the last few years. Tyler, welcome to the Meebits podcast.
Oh man, thank you so much for that super kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, man, and you're a good friend as well, and a homie at that. So I'm excited for this one.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible year, I think, for GVC and for NFTs and everybody. So why don't we just jump right into it? Moonbirds. I'm just kidding. GVC, obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But before we go into the project, the art, and everything that you guys have built over the last, 13 months now, I would love to hear more about your background. You have a very unique background, having been at Reddit, Life at Tech. I think people think of Good Vibes Club mostly from, Toast, your animation studio, that I will also love to dive into. But, who's Tyler? Where did he come from? What did he do before this crazy world of NFTs?
Yeah, awesome. So I started my career out in San Francisco, worked at a couple different tech startups out there. And towards the end of that little stint, I moved over to Reddit. And I was the first, I think I was employee 110 or around 100, somewhere in there. The company was pretty small at the time. Steve and Alexis had just come back to run it after they had sold it to Condé Nast. And so, I did several years at Reddit. I started on the ops side on the community team and, built out the go-to-market process. So every feature that we launched over a course of a couple of years, I quarterbacked the go-to-market for. This is everything from image hosting to a redesign of the whole site. And then as we were building out a crypto team, I moved over to the product side and was a PM there. And so we were looking for an ERC20 use case, on Reddit. And so as somebody who's been, interested in crypto and just blockchain as a technology for a long time, it was super fun. And, Chris, my older brother, is a longtime 3D artist, and he worked and lived in New York for a very long time and at all the shops out there. And so we had spoke for many years about wanting to start an animation studio. And, we started Toast, I think it was 7 years ago now, and been very fortunate over the years to work with some really amazing brands like Facebook, and we redesigned Facebook Messenger. We also did the foundation of Reddit's redesign. So I worked with them after I left, and, Google and a lot of amazing, companies like that. And so, our bet really is, we've helped all these amazing brands build and establish their IP. And, we wanted to really do that with our own IP, which was Good Vibes Club. And so we started working on Good Vibes Club back in 2021, towards the end of 2021, actually. And so we just so much missed the mania there. But the reality is to do something as ambitious as what we wanted to do in 3D, taking a commercial animation production pipeline and building out, a 3D, high fidelity art collection. It just took a lot of time. So it took us a little over 3 years to make the collection, and we minted it. Actually, it'll be a year ago. I don't know when this is going to go live, but tomorrow is our 1 year anniversary of our mint. And so it's been a full year now since we minted, and it's been, incredible journey. And, I'm so grateful for, everything in between. But long-winded way of saying, hey, that's, where I started in San Francisco to Good Vibes Club.
Amazing. Well, happy birthday, GVC, and thank you for spending your birthday week with us. You obviously very long trajectory, long career. I kind of want to go back to the Reddit days. I think it's such a, probably was very formative for a lot of us that grew up on the internet, older millennials and so on. Definitely was for me. And just curious what it was like working with Alexis. Did you learn about NFTs from him? Obviously, he's a big punk collector. He bought a bunch of punks that resemble his wife. Curious how that was internally.
Yeah, no, his desk used to be 10 feet away from mine, actually. And his feet are massive. He's a very large human. But the nicest guy. And so when, Reddit was, I think it was 10 years old at the time that I joined. And there was only 100 or so people. And so we knew each other very well. And it was really interesting because, I was a Reddit user long before I worked at Reddit. And it kind of felt like the frontier of the internet in a way, the wild, wild west. this is back before community was a buzzword, and online communities are in a way a social science. And so on the ops side, the community team, there was some like really hardcore community managers that really understood the nuances of online communities that I was fortunate to learn from very early on, before anybody was really talking about community on the internet. And so my exposure to NFTs wasn't actually via him. It was through my old college roommate at the time. He invited me to Eat Denver in 2018, and I said no, I didn't go. And I'm regretful of that, because I probably would have more CryptoPunks than I do now. And so, but it was a interesting journey, because like this is back. I mean, we've now lived through a couple cycles of crypto. And back then, like there was this whole like ICO boom. And so we were seeing, tokens or ICOs pop up out of left field, and, people would discover them on Reddit. And this is before crypto Twitter was a big thing. Like Reddit was the source of truth for crypto information. And so, in my opinion, it was really awesome, because, it was very philosophy based, and there was a lot of altruism and in terms of like the technology changing the world, and very ambitious sort of ways in which that looks. And so, to have exposure to that, at the time in which I did, was really cool. But it was definitely an interesting time. And like, this is back when like, there was the rise of like the Donald subreddit on, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was like, Pepe meme culture, like 101 going wild. I remember we actually published a list of like foreign, accounts that we knew of that were coordinating across, Reddit for misinformation. We worked together with Twitter and Facebook at the time. And so it was just like a super cool experience, at a very interesting point in my career.
Yeah, Reddit's always been one of my favorite places on the internet. And for me, it really is when you have like a banger post and then people just start replying. And I think replies on Reddit are just such a form of art, like community, like group performance, when people like start putting like one-liners from songs and it just keeps going for like 300 replies, or people just completely like take you on a wild tangent. It's it's definitely, again, one of my favorite things to spend some time on the internet as well. And yeah, CryptoPunks, obviously Matt and John announced CryptoPunks on Reddit, which is such a cool kind of like full circle for you, I guess.
Yeah, it's so crazy, man. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, it's really cool to see how that. Honestly, Reddit played a huge role in the early parts of a lot of people's crypto journeys, like within NFTs and not. And so I really like the way that Reddit was set up from like a moderation standpoint in the mechanics of upvoting and downvoting content, because it really allowed for like insightful comments or really funny shit posts to kind of surface to the top. And to your point, like it's an art to be able to shit post well on Reddit. And so that was a muscle that I had to develop when I was there.
So you just said something that I think it's maybe missing from the dialogue on Twitter, on crypto Twitter, which is that ability to like downvote something.
Right.
I feel like obviously Twitter is a little more aggressive and people have more hostile, maybe more like 4chan than Reddit was. But sometimes the messaging does get a little like too kumbaya, I think,
right,
on X. But maybe we can talk about that at the later part of the podcast. Let's talk about the transition and what you learned while being at Reddit that obviously has instructed, I guess, a lot of what you guys have now executed with GVC now a year later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Reddit being a messaging forum, anytime we had to make like any sort of change to the website, we were launching a new feature or anything, oftentimes we were finding out about what we would ship, our engineers would build from users writing in, mad that it broke a third-party app or extension or whatever. These early days. So back when Reddit had 4 PMs and as we built our go-to-market process and we formalized our launch comms around it, troubleshooting and figuring out, poking holes in the go-to-market plan, Reddit users are cunning and they're smart and they love to complain. And so, when you're building a go-to-market for something as grandiose as a full-fledged redesign for people who really like the way that, Craigslist looks, essentially, is what Reddit used to look like, it can be a little challenging because people would write in just like, screw you. They would get really mad over changes and whatnot. And so, that kind of flexes a different muscle in terms of like, how do you operationalize like a launch? And so I think for us, like, obviously we're in year 7 of our animation studio, run a business for a very long time. And we worked with a lot of very large tech companies that have complex org charts on the other end. And so when you bring something to market, there's a certain, level of like sequencing and in how thoughtful you are, not only in the products that you build, whether it's like a badge system or whatever, but the beats that you hit as you go to market and the way that you prepare. And so, I think like having that operational experience at Reddit and doing that in a place in which I remember I tried to launch like a governance tool in R Libertarian when we were working on our crypto product, and that was a nightmare. So, I've definitely made some mistakes and whatnot, but it definitely informs how you think about planning and strategizing around going to market with anything. And an NFT mint is a complex beast that that was my first NFT mint that I've ever done, and hopefully my only one at a large scale. And so it's been very interesting to kind of draw parallels to some early days Reddit stuff.
Who came up with the idea of the aesthetics of GVC, the name, kind of like, obviously your brother, obviously, I'm guessing he's the creative.
Yeah.
You both share kind of like face of the brand roles, but how was that initial conversation? Like, what is the GVC Genesis lore?
Yeah, so it wasn't called GVC. We refer to it as a couple different things. I don't even remember, honestly. I need to ask. So Chris is the main creative. Like, my brother is like a world-class artist. Like, from a 3D perspective, like, sculpting, modeling, designing, and animating, he's just insanely talented. And so I always joke that like Chris dreams in like rainbows and bubbles and colors and stuff, because like everything he loves to create is so colorful. And running a commercial animation studio, especially on the production side, like, clients over the years have said like, we don't want it to be too toy-like and et cetera. And the way that Chris thinks and loves to express himself is very, you met him in person, he's super loud and vivacious. And I think Good Vibes Club, from an art direction standpoint, is representative of his personality. And so he was the main brain behind the aesthetic. And as an animation studio, like, we have work that makes you money. You have client work that is like really cool, and obviously some client work is more creatively fulfilling than others. But people become artists to just express themselves. And so Chris, wanting to do that, like, we always carved out at least one major project every year where we'd have it going on in the background, artists in between reviews, they'd work on it, whatever. And Good Vibes Club was kind of born out of that. And so, being able to just create for the sake of creating and practice, whether it's working on character work or whatever, it's very, very complex and different than, animating a simple shape. That's kind of how it started.
Amazing. So was it like a call? Were you guys hanging out? Were you guys like 14 Cuba Libres deep? Like, I appreciate the kind of like very, I don't want to say political, but like very formal answer. But I think that people really want to know, like, how did that big bang happen? Like, were you guys just like on the couch, like, hey, we should just like start an NFT project, bro? Like, what happened?
So we won a pitch for Ford and Chase at the same time. And we were trying to staff we had a couple other jobs going on at the same time. So trying to staff it, and all these artists that we would normally hire, they're like, no, we're not taking commercial bookings anymore because we're making NFTs. And so we're like, what the shit? Like, how are we gonna do this? And so we were like, at the time, like, we were aware of NFTs, like, obviously being in crypto, had minted a few ourselves and whatnot. And so we had talked about, building a collection ourselves, but we knew it'd be a shitload of work and a huge undertaking in 3D. And our good friend John Crane, founder of Super Air, he came, up to us and was like, hey, have you thought about, doing, a large scale, NFT collection? And, we were like, actually, we had started Design Explore for it, but we hadn't, actually minted it yet, or really formalized the name, or really, put much behind it. It was just Design Explore at the time. And so that was the nudge that kind of, we needed to really take a swing at it, because, we hand sculpted over, I mean, this from Meebits, like, it's a very complex thing to create pieces of art in 3D. And so we hand sculpted over 800 different trades. And, that takes a long time, especially if this is before AI and being able to generate base meshes like at the prompt and, flick of your fingers. It was a lot of work. So yeah, early days, we got a nudge from our good buddy, John, and we decided to go in.
Well, shout out to John, also a good friend of the Meebits. And dude, 3D work. Okay, so I went into this whole Meebits situation, obviously from a passion for Meebits, but no background on 3D or anything like that. And we brought Bailey on board. I think he's one of the greatest creative directors in Web3. Then brought in S10. Now we have Haskell working under him as artist. But one of the biggest shocks to me was I was like, hey, well, why don't we do renders every other day? And he looked at me like, are you insane? And I'm like, what? You're just you grab the model, you put it on a background, and he's like, you have no idea how long these things take. And he works pretty fast for average. But yeah, it took me a while to really, I was like, all right, Bailey, let's sit down. Let's do a Google call. You share your screen and I can see what you're doing. Oh my God, man, that is so much work. so definitely appreciate, I think no shade to anybody, but in 21, a lot of the collections with your Python scripts with 2D trades that people paid artists on, Fiverr and stuff like that to kind of just make the trades, run them through a Python script, mint it, and it was a very different time. The fact that you guys spent all years building, creating all these trades, I think is super impressive. And then you minted at, probably, I feel like the market is, spot market is slower today than it was last year, but NFTs were probably better last year than they sometimes feel today. How was that? The mint, wasn't like immediate mint out. It was little by little, but eventually it went. And then, so I remember you and I first met in person at NFC Lisbon last year. Shout out to John Karp and that team. They talk about somebody who shows up in the middle of the bear market and just keeps going. So we'll be in Lisbon this year again. But yeah, talk to me about those first, couple of weeks, couple of months where, things are, you came into a very difficult market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was NFTs were way deader then. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fear in the market now, but at the time in which we minted, I think the fear index was the worst it had been since, FTX collapsed. And so specifically around NFTs, everyone's like, why would you launch an NFT collection? We spent a lot of time working on what we were really proud of from an art perspective, and we wanted to share it with people. And we have this grandiose vision of building an IP and, the future of the way that art looks. I could speak about that too if you want, but yeah, I mean, we knew it would be really tough. We minted, it took 10 hours. We minted out by the skin of our teeth, I think, in the last 30 seconds of a 10 or 12 hour auction. And so, and then once people saw the art, that's when things really took off, which is really interesting because normally, in newer mints, people, there's a lot of speculation and price will run and then it'll reveal and then it'll drop off a cliff. For us, it was the exact opposite. It was really, really slow. And then once people saw the art, that's when it ran, which, was a very, how do I put this? It was not gratifying. It was gratifying, sure, but it was validating in a way that hey, we really took the time to do what we thought was right and to make something that we're just genuinely proud of. And, people responded well to it. And so, due to Chris's, incessant desire to create all the time, I'll frame it like that. I think the collection is representative of that. Where he would spend just an ungodly amount of time, making new trades and doing all this stuff. And so it was really cool to see the market respond to our collection in the way that they did.
Yeah. I mean, I was heads down with the first couple months of Meebits, so I kind of totally missed it then. But I do remember every single person that I met who had met you guys, they were they're the coolest dudes ever. And I'm like, wow. Well, you can just, say that about anybody, but no, you guys, your brother, obviously, very caffeinated all the time. I love how he's I had 18 espressos this morning, 4 pump, frappuccino, latte, whatever. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how you do it, but that's amazing. But yeah, and I feel the rest of your team as well, you've put a really cool team together. You've hired some people from the community. I feel like the GVC road is, it's not I'm guessing you did have a roadmap, but you've been able to kind of adjust and add things as you go through time, at least from my perspective, obviously, strategy tokens, for example,
Right.
they were not around by when you guys minted or during your first months. They came out later. You guys chose to obviously adopt that and like lead in that direction. And I would love to talk about that next. But for now, kind of like talk to me about the vision. How much flexibility is there? Obviously, you're not chasing metas. I see people chasing the revenue meta, this and that. You're not really like making it an effort to like go after every single thing, but you do keep an eye on what's going on and you bring it in. The badges, were there like original roadmap things or things that you added? Because now you have like other friendly projects like Chimper's adding those as well. I think they make a lot of sense. Yep. So yeah, kind of like walk me through the mentality when it comes to like kind of like the business strategy side of things.
Yeah, for sure. So funny enough, I built badges at Reddit, and the infra that we built later became the digital collectibles, the NFTs. And so having already built badges, like it's so perfect for digital collectibles and NFT collection. So we always, we knew we were going to build badges. And of course we had things that, we know we're going to build or we're actively building them. We're in a very interesting position in that a lot of people mint an NFT collection and then they say, we're going to finish or figure out a business after that. And we already have a business that we've run, for a long time. We have amazing clients. We still work with some of them. We're mainly focused on Good Vibes Club related work these days. And, our philosophy is always, let's do things the right way, even if it takes a little bit more time. We've always been anti-token. We didn't want to launch a token. It's a net extraction on the community, in a lot of situations. And so, it's just something that we were never going to do, as GVC. And so, when strategy tokens came around, obviously, you were in the first batch of 5 that launched. And so the way that you maneuvered and was awesome and inspiring in a lot of ways. And so hats off to you there, because you were, one of the few that like said, or the first person really to say like, we're going to lean in and, do a lot of things around. I remember you buying STRs on Gandhi and like super cool. And so, for us having not wanted to launch a token ourselves, adopting a strategy token, as our ecosystem token made a lot of sense. And the reason why I like it is, of course, it's, connected to the NFT collection. Sure. There's probably 10 reasons why I really like it. But the main one, which I think really solves a fundamental issue that we've all wanted as NFT collectors in the space as participants for a long time, which is we want our digital collectible or NFT to represent not only membership, but also, call it upside in the brand. But, we can't, OV and Rect, they did the best thing, that they could. They issued equity to NFT holders. I thought that was really inspiring. I think strategy tokens, because we didn't launch the token from a compliance standpoint, you can create this like loop where you can give back to your NFT holders in a way for them to capture the upside of the brand, in a way that's not you just coming out with some, FTV and launching your token that, ultimately, puts a lot of sell pressure on your ecosystem assets. And so, because it's fair launch, it's very unique. And, I think that, now as an IP, as an animation studio, having worked on production partnerships for better part of a decade at this point, of course, expanding beyond just the Web3 digital collectible space is important. Obviously we're going to take a big swing with that this year. But, you've seen, people move into physicals, you've seen people do all sorts of stuff, with their IP and their brands. And that makes a lot of sense, but you have to focus on the foundation first. And for us, that's been the first year. We want that loop to close back to our holders in a way that retains that like crypto nativity, because that's what makes the space special and, why you would build a brand in Web3, as a starting point. And so, that's our philosophy behind it. We like to move a little bit more calculated, and, we have, our vision for, what that looks like, but we're not going to just, chase metas and try to, spin up a narrative because it's popular.
What would you say, like, obviously royalties you guys have, enforced royalties. I think we should find a better term other than enforce. Enforce sounds like too aggressive, but there's royalties on your secondary trades. One of the first collections that actually has that. What would you say, like, your roadmap or your experience would have been like if royalties were not enforced and you saw kind of like every other collection, majority of their volume trades not on OpenSea, and it just, kind of like a wash for the brand, which takes away from the ability of what you just said right now, which is, how do I create value for my holders?
Yeah, I mean that's the position that I really admire. Like that, I empathize with where you guys are at, because you guys have a historical art collection. There's 20,000 Meebits. Matt and John created it, and it's such an incredible representation of art. But it's not like you minted it yourself, and so like there's a different dynamic, and how you've approached that I think is really interesting and novel and unique. And for us, like, we were self-funded in starting Toast. Our animation studio's bootstrap. We grew it over a long time. And with Good Vibes Club, it's the same way. And so funny enough, like a fun fact, we only netted like 900K in our mint, and we've put over 7 figures back into our ecosystem. And largely that's due to the fact that we have enforced royalties. And so the 721C is amazing, and it enables, you to really build around and reinvest into your community. And so, we market bought a bunch of our strategy token, which was cool. We, bought a bunch of STRs, like tons of them, sweat the floor a bit and all that stuff. It's like, showing alignment with your community is really in action, not just in, an idea. And so, having the 721C is important, but as a business, we're not totally reliant on that. Like, we have our animation studio that, on the commercial side, it's a good business. And so, obviously our vision for, the future and how anybody can prompt AI now and create an image like that. Like back in 2021, you would post an animation and your floor price would actually change. Like now it's like, it's crazy. Like, how different it is. And so, the future of IP is owning the IP. And so, being able to, build out the IP, whether it's in digital collectibles, whether it's in physicals, whether it's in consumables, that's, I think, the future of brand building, and, starting in Web3 is really important. So to answer your initial question is like, what would I do differently if I didn't have that? I'd probably fundraise. I'd probably, be a lot more focused on like, what is the quickest route in which we can create sustainable revenue for our community? Like for us, we focus on that, sustainability component first and foremost. In revenue, we already have. And so the guardrails are there with the 721C, but also in the animation studio. And so I think like we can afford taking time before we make, specific moves because of that, which has been really nice.
Yeah, no, amazing. And you guys have executed so well, because it's not like you just capturing the royalties, but to your point, you're putting a lot more back into the ecosystem that you initially received from the community. One of the things you said when we're initially talking about the STR token, strategy token, is that it gives you the ability to give upside to your holders. I think, and obviously you have Toast, and obviously you mentioned it's a good business. I'm sure no business lasts 7 years if it's not a good business. So props to that. Like there's so many other like ideas out there where people think they're gonna get revenue directly from that external business into the NFT. And sometimes I feel like that people are not doing the math. And I'm not, saying that this is the case here, but just broadly speaking, as we think about the industry and why SDRs are better, right? Because SDRs, you do have that very mechanical flywheel where the obviously a certain percentage of every secondary trade of the token goes into a wallet that you guys control, that obviously you've committed to buy back assets that helps the collection floor. Goes directly not into the pockets of the holders, but it helps everybody in the ecosystem. And then obviously you have a percentage of that token that gets burned. So the token holders, the fungible token holders, can also benefit from that secondary market activity. So that's actual, it's a mechanical way of giving back. Whereas people who say, hey, we're going to give you revenue eventually, right? If you're talking about, let's just say a 10,000 NFT collection and a company makes, let's say, $10 million. And not just even like revenue is one thing, but like profit, right? But if let's say it's 10 million of profit, if you were to distribute that accordingly to each holder, you're talking about what is it, like $1,000? And I that's why I love the strategy stuff that you guys did at taking it in as your ecosystem token, because that is actual tangible support for the holders. That's actual alignment versus just saying, hey, in the future, we might give you some sort of dividend. And by the way, when you actually do the math, the dividend is pennies compared to what people are projecting. That's always kind of like struck me. And that's why when I saw strategy, I mean, I wish we had a little bit more leeway there with like our own royalties and so on. We're still thinking about ways of doing something, but obviously it's a little tougher. But when I saw you guys and now like Chimpers, for example, implement that, like I think that is the most egalitarian way of actually saying we are aligned, and like I can actually show you the number. I can go back, and instead of me just pulling out of my ass saying, oh, I've done this for you guys, it's like, no, we've put in this amount of money into the ecosystem, and it's all on chain. To your point about Web3, like there's no like, trust me, bro. And that's amazing. So props up to you guys and Chimpers and everybody else coming after y'all that's doing it, because that's, I think, kind of like it was a missing link in this whole NFT ecosystem.
Dude, I agree. It's because like, you know, if you have an NFT and you're participating and contributing to the success of a community, you know, I think Ovi and the swing that he did with his brand coin, you know, there's legal components at play in which you can't like on a schedule promise revenue injection, you know, with like this predefined metric. You know, you have to be able to like inject the revenue or, you know, but do buybacks on some sort of like off cycle that you just announce when you do it, right? And so, you know, it's different when you launch the token and someone else does. And so what really closes the loop for us is that we have an entire badge, you know, system that we've built. And so people have badges for different traits in their NFT. We, with our 1% protocol fee from Vibester, we actually just give that back to our community. We haven't done that yet, but you know, essentially the way in which people will be able to claim out of the rewards pool is via the badges. And so that's what that then creates the loop, is that you have this rewards pool, which now has a CryptoPunk in it because we bought it for the node opening, and a bunch of GVCs and a bunch of Vibester. And, you know, obviously Ethereum's down right now comparatively to a couple months ago, but at one point the, you know, rewards pool was $500,000. And so, you know, now you're looking at like, okay, how do we sustainably and, you know, continuously give back to our community that really makes, you know, GVC what it is? And so the rewards pool portion going back to holders based on badges is how that looks. And so that's what really completes the loop that we haven't actually rolled out yet, but, you know, we're planning on making some updates around that soon.
No, yeah, it's amazing. It's also because it's transparent, right? Like you're not, and trust me, bro, like though we made this much, no, we made this much. No, it's like right there. That's what the pool is worth. Yeah, ETH is down, but like you can see the assets, you can verify it. Again, it's the most egalitarian thing I've seen. I think that's a meme, but I mean it. No, it's really, really cool. And you know, it's we're talking about the whole like kumbaya thing, and maybe it'll be the spicy part of the podcast if you're down. Obviously, no names or anything, but I do feel like sometimes the whole, you know, kumbaya thing, people just put up with anything, right. and I feel like sometimes you have to be a little bit more critical, and you have to hold ourselves, you know, to higher standards if we're trying to make in this industry grow. Like you and I talk a lot you know, behind the scenes and compare notes, and it's like I feel confident that if I saw you guys doing something that maybe wasn't the best for the ecosystem and I raised it up to you, you would be open to having the conversation. And I don't think you guys would ever do something like that, but I also feel very comfortable knowing that if you ever sent me a message and said, hey dude, like this does not, you know, feel good, we will be having a very like adult conversation about it. Obviously Twitter, public conversation, so on, very different, back defending and all that stuff. I mean, you know, it's just human nature. Right. But I do think that like, you know, when you compare like fungible, like this crop of NFT coins, that are they, first they were just meme coins. Now people are trying to tie them to revenue that is completely not transparent. Now we're going back to meme coins and so on. So like, what do you think the industry is actually missing to like, you've been at Reddit, you helped build one of the best companies in the world. You've built now your own company with Toast. You're doing it again with GVC, but now you're part of this industry that's still kind of like, I feel like it suffers from like the typical crypto bullshit with like, a lot of like, hey, well, if it made money for some people, then it's okay, even though they made money at the expense of others. Where it could be like much bigger than that. What's missing? I feel like, is it that maybe just a tiny bit of PvP could like put us back in a place, or is it maybe just, I don't know. I'm curious. The world has heard my thoughts. I'm keen to hear yours.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think, collectively we have to hold each other to higher standards. And, one thing to your point about Reddit, Reddit is it's a messaging board essentially. And comments are curated by upvotes and downvotes. And when I was at Reddit, Steve once a quarter would do an AMA where everybody would be like, F you Spez, like they'd say all this horrible stuff, but then they'd also ask questions that were hard to answer about the business. And he would do it not because he had to, but because it was better for everybody. And so there was a certain level of accountability that we had as Reddit, the company, that we maintained consistency about with our community, or, the large pool of users that would use Reddit. And so what that taught me at an early point in my career, or a formative point in my career, which is that, hard discourse and accountability is really important. And, back in early days crypto, like it was super, philosophy based. All the conversation was, on Reddit, and it was, philosophy based. And now on Twitter, it's very much so entertainment based. And so it's a different sort of arena that people talk about the nuances and the specifics of industry on Twitter. And so, for us to really go to the next step, there, obviously you and I, we have a great relationship, and, my philosophy is if somebody's building, in, good nature and good intention for their community, we should all want to work together. We should all do what we can in order to contribute to the space, to really, because it's a small pond. And for us to really go to that next level, like we need that. And so I think it's really important, but along with that comes, an objective sort of, not analysis, but like, a nuance to, what is right or good for the collective everyone. And so I think that there are certain things like, that are in net extraction. And, if that takes place amongst, our circle of founders and people that we speak with, like we should speak up. We should have a conversation around it, and we should do so, with honorable intent to, obviously do what's best for everybody, but, we shouldn't shy away from the hard conversation. And so, for me, like, I think the space needs a little bit more of that. Right now it's very much so bag biased and entertainment based, but that's by nature of Twitter. In my opinion, having come from Reddit, where people would talk all the time about things that were less like that. And so still you get some of the shit posting as well, but, a little bit different. So I don't know. I agree. I've seen, a lot of what you've said about it, and we've spoken at length too. Like, I do think that a level of transparency in terms of claiming revenue numbers, or, what those revenue numbers are, and, are tokens for NFT collections, like, a net positive for holders and, NFT assets. Like, there's so much there that, we could talk about. But I know we think of it very similarly.
Yeah, man. I think long term, people hopefully will look back and say, okay, there were some things that were not so good. I mean, we can already say that about 21. Right. When people were like, hey, like these things are not so good. Obviously, like now with 2020 hindsight, a lot of those will actually turn out to be, the wrong decisions and the wrong moves. And I don't know, I feel like ethics is missing a little bit. I think that we're a small startup industry. And yeah, I want to be cheering for everybody. We've cheered for everybody, like publicly have engaged with everybody, supported everybody. But when you see some stuff where like, holders start being taken advantage of by information asymmetry, like, yeah, it's a point to maybe raise your hand. For me, I don't think like there's anything wrong with just saying, certain tokens they're meme coins, guys. Like they are, trading vehicles, speculation vehicles. Like, yeah, if you're long Ether or bullish Ether after whatever geopolitical thing just happened, most likely a meme coin in that ecosystem will go up more than Ether. So yeah, use it as a trading vehicle. but to pseudo pretend that it's some sort of like, equity in your company that's based on some like whatever number that you're making up. Come on, man. It's
Yeah. Well,
like we're not little kids here. I find it insulting, right? Like
I do too.
part of the market. I am part of the market. And so if you're lying to my face and I know you're lying to my face, you're like insulting me. And that's where like, yeah, it's a little annoying. I mean, you guys have had some, we won't get into details, but some public disagreements with some other communities, which is funny to me because again, like good vibes. It's like truly good vibes. I feel like you guys, very, very ethically. And do you think that comes from people are like, oh, you're jealous of other projects and so on? But it's like, where do you think like the actual issue arises? Is it jealousy really? Is it bags? What's different? Like we're not all operating the same kind of like wavelength. What do you think that is?
I think it's a challenge to the status quo. And I think that's what strategy tokens represent. I mean, you remember back when Obi was having the success with Rect as a brand coin and published the brand coin white paper. A lot of the KOLs that were bankrolled by other communities, they were talking about their formerly branded meme coins as now brand coins. And then with strategy tokens, it was, the same, where it was another rebrand. And so I think that, we've seen, and this is the benefit of not launching in 21-22, is that we've been able to see what works really well and what doesn't. And so for us, like we've taken steps and made moves, or we've reinvested back into our ecosystem. We've put our money where our mouth is to, demonstrate to our community that we're, doing right by them, which I think is really important. And that's like a core value of what I believe, is one fundamental to the Vibes Club, but, really important for the space. And so I think that when you just objectively look at, a meme coin or, I think it's been horrible for crypto. Like, sure, there's tons of liquidity in them, but like, it's definitely different. Like now everybody's trading perps, holding spot, and I don't know. Anyway, so not to go off on a tangent because I can feel myself beginning to, for us, like, I think that, there's an old way of doing things, which is an NFT collection becomes popular and then it launches their meme coin. Or there's a new way of doing things, which was a strategy token. It's a fair launch token. And so, adopting that as our ecosystem token essentially says to the rest of the market that like the old way that, things have been done is what we're not choosing to be what's best for Good Vibes Club. And we're essentially saying that this new way is our path. And so, there can be multiple different ways of doing something, but I think that the friction that we've felt as a community is really in challenge to that status quo. And so I think that most all of the conflict that, or drama that we've seen on the timeline stems from that.
Nice. No, I love what you guys are doing. And for us, the closest way that we align ourselves with collectors is we hold 885 Meebits as the last count. And we're just continuing to add with like upcycling and so on. But yeah, some enforced royalties will be very, very nice, not going to lie. Let's switch gears a little bit here for the last few minutes of the podcast. We asked people on Twitter to ask some questions. So we're taking actual questions from the audience. There's some very serious ones. I mean, shout out to Dort. I don't have time to read the 14 paragraphs that he wrote, but we love Dort. Huge member of the GBC community, active member of the Meebits community. Here's one from Joker. Is it true that you wear your wife's clothes when she's out of town? Spicy.
Allegedly, neither can confirm nor deny.
All right, we'll take that. You heard it here, guys. I cannot confirm more than that. No, in all seriousness, he's asking, what's the ultimate vision for GBC?
Yeah, I mean, creating an IP that is relatable, beyond crypto, I think is really important. But it starts fundamentally with, being a Web3 board brand in your digital collector community. And so for us, like that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. So, the IP business is very grandiose and proven out to be effective in, whatever industry that, people choose to monetize or do certain things. And so for us, I think that, we live at like this very interesting moment in which you can launch a Web3 brand and have a community that essentially powers you, everything else that you do as the business. And so, keeping your digital collector community at the core of it is, first and foremost of importance. And, with GVC, we want to prove that model out, specifically in regards to what that looks like. And so, like all new things, testing and trying different ways in which that looks is important. And a lot of the other brands in the space have done that too. So that's kind of just high level how I think about it.
Yeah, I think everybody's taking different paths. That's awesome too, by the way, right? Like, Pudgy's going the cute route. Obviously Apes with other sides. It's a big bold bet that, we support, we love it. And then there's stuff like Chimpers, which is a bit of like a maybe like cute, but also, I mean, they've done some great collabs with Web2 brands, and then you have the Doodles of the world and some of the new upstarts. I like that it's not, the same playbook for everybody, because that does expand the surface area. All right, we'll move on to another creator who's had a lot of success recently. Also a big member of the GVC family and a member of the Meebits and Punks family, Cirque. He's asking, what are your favorite traits in both the GVC and the Meebits collections?
Ooh, honestly, I think it would be the same trait in both, ironically, which is the stash.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I have a stash meme actually. Let me pull up my why. I remember. Oh wait, I don't have the tab open. I have a stash meme as well. So I'd say my favorite.
We'll throw it on.
Yeah, we'll throw it up. And then I don't have a Meebit that has this trait, but I love the tattoos and change. I have a couple tattoos, and my main PFP, which is you can kind of see. Oh, there's wifey on the wall. I don't have my Meebit, but I got my punk up there. Has tattoo and chains as well, and so I'd say those are my favorite, GVC and Meebits traits, because I need to get a tattoo and change Meebit. I was looking at that the other day, actually.
Let's do it, man. Happy to trade with the treasury, or there's tattoos. It's weird. They don't really come to market at levels that I think are fair sometimes, where the floor is. But then maybe, my own assessment might be a little low. But happy to trade from the treasury. Let's last question from the audience. And when are Meebits and GVC collaborating?
Ooh, we need to bring back the jersey swap, dude.
Yes, now more than ever with Meebits football.
Yes, that's right, dude. We need to. We absolutely need to. I know we were going to create like a custom animation for this, but I know y'all are super busy with a lot of stuff you have going on, and us as well. So we'll get something in the works for sure. It's got to happen.
We'll have it by NFC. How's that?
Yeah.
We'll have it by NFC. I think that'll be a good anniversary celebrate. We were all on the same panel. It was annoying because we got some really good pictures taken of us, and I'm usually the best looking one on the panels. But this time around, you were sitting next to me, and like I can't send that picture to my mom. Who's like that guy next to you, like mogging you. Like I couldn't. I had to crop it, and it was funny. So
get out of here, dude.
Shout out to V, also World of Women. Everybody just really trying their best, taking a bunch of different shots, which I think is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Well, listen, this has been awesome. I like that. For the Meebits podcast, obviously I try to bring people from my personal network and friends to just kind of like have the opportunity to let our audience almost like listen in on the conversations that we would have, as friends or in the same business and so on. So they obviously I very inspired by Raul, good friend, and Real Vision, and so a lot of the things that I learned in finance came from watching Real Vision interviews from the early days, where he'll just be with like some of the big hedge fund managers, and you're kind of like fly on the wall. So I love that this was very much like that, where this is really what we talk about and we discuss. There's some meme exchanges that we can't do here for technical reasons. But this was awesome. I don't know if there's anything else you want to leave our audience with.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on 1 year of GVC, and I'm very grateful because we have a lot of awesome members in our community. But there's a lot of really awesome people in the space, like you, Sergio, and being able to develop friendships with y'all has been really cool. And so it's for me an honor to come on the Meebits podcast. It's an honor to be a Meebits holder. And further ingrained in this, wider community of people that are just trying to, do the right thing and, build in a way that is for the future for everybody. And so, it's cool to sit down, have a conversation with you, and be episode 21 on this thing.
Let's go. And you're the first like NFT founder, which everybody thinks everybody's competing with each other. But it's an honor. Thank you for spending the time. I also have a Vibe, which I love.
That's right.
I haven't really had a lot of liquidity recently to buy NFTs, but I was very, very proud to pick up a Vibe. I just remember, I want to support everybody. And I think also Quirkus, Poppy doing a good job over there. I still need to save some money. These things keep freaking running, man. You guys are doing such a good job that I'm like priced out. But anyway, shout out to him and every other team that is still building. Again, I think if you're building ethically, is so much better. And we're all cheering for everybody. And I think, it's such a big difference. So yeah, appreciate you and your brother. Obviously, your third member of the team, we didn't get to talk about him, but dear to my heart as a fellow Mexican. But everybody in your community and everybody like that is adjacent to the space, is doing things epically. Shout out to you all, and thanks everybody for watching episode 21 of the Meebits podcast. It's an exciting time in Metropolis with Meebits football and everything else we got going on. So yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.